After the ambush, Niko Bellic went back to the pit where the enemy had dumped his friends. He dug the bodies out and he counted them and he identified every face because that was the only way to work out which two men had walked away. That is how the search starts. Not with revenge, with arithmetic over a mass grave. And everything that happens to him in Liberty City comes out of that night. Rockstar never shows you any of it.
Yeah.
There is no flashback mission, no war footage, not one playable minute of the conflict that made him. Everything you know about Niko before he steps off that boat, you assembled yourself. Out of arguments and phone calls and things he mutters when nobody is asking. So let's put it together piece by piece and get back to that pit. Start with the most basic question and watch it fall apart. Where is Niko from? The game never says. Not once, across roughly 30 hours of dialogue, does anyone name his country. He says outright that he is not Russian, which kills the theory half the internet ran with. He speaks Serbo-Croatian in a few scattered lines, and Roman suggests it is the Serbian variety. The war he describes lines up with the Yugoslav wars of the 90s. That is as close as you get. Rockstar has been asked directly, and the answer from the studio was that Niko comes from a gray, broken down corner of Eastern Europe, deliberately unplaceable. And that choice shapes everything. Name the country and you name a side. And the second there is a side, players start doing arithmetic on whether Niko was one of the good ones. Leave it blank and you cannot run that calculation. You judge him on what he did instead of which flag he did it under, which turns out to be the entire design. The second piece comes from before the fighting started. Niko's father was a violent alcoholic who beat his wife and his children. His mother, Milica, still writes to him in Liberty City, still asks whether he is eating, still hopes he found something better. Roman grew up in that same village and got out early. So the man who arrives in America damaged did not get that way from the war alone. The war landed on a kid who had already learned that the people meant to protect you are usually the ones you have to survive. Watch how little that changes in Broker. Every man who offers him work wants something, and Niko keeps saying yes. He has been doing it since he was a boy. But none of that explains the hunt. For that, you need the war. The Yugoslav wars ran through the first half of the 90s, and Niko fought in them as a teenager. Not a young man who signed up, a kid carrying a rifle years before he was old enough to drink in the country he would eventually run to. He served as an infantryman. He also flew helicopters, which the game quietly confirms when he takes the controls without hesitation. Roman claims he drove tanks too, although Roman also claims he owns a mansion and a fleet of sports cars, so handle that one carefully. What he saw, he never narrates properly. It leaks out sideways. A comment about villages, a refusal to be impressed by anything Liberty City calls dangerous, and the admission that he did not only witness the atrocities, he took part in some of them. Which brings us to the ambush, and this is the piece everything else hangs from. 15 men, all from Niko's village, boys he had grown up with. Enemy forces hit them in a position they should never have been able to find. 12 died. Niko fought his way out, and weeks later, thinking about how precisely that attack had landed, he arrived at the only conclusion available. Somebody inside the squad had told them where to be, which is what sent him back to that pit. Not grief and not a funeral. He needed a head count. 12 bodies meant 12 names crossed off, and whatever names were left over belonged to men who had walked away from an ambush that killed everybody else. 2 names were left over, Florian Kravik and Darko Breivik. He had no way of knowing which one, so he decided to find both. That search is why he crosses an ocean, why he ends up in Liberty City, and why almost every friendship he makes there is really a lead he is following. But there is a gap here most people skip past, and it is roughly a decade wide. The war ends. Niko is a teenage veteran in a wrecked economy, with no qualifications and a skill set that only pays in one industry. So he goes into that industry, years of work for organized crime in Europe, including a stretch moving people across the water for Ray Bulgarin, a human trafficker whose reappearance in Liberty City is not a coincidence. One of those boats goes down. The people on board are lost. Bulgarin decides Niko robbed him, and now he has two pasts hunting him instead of one. So he goes to sea. Years on merchant ships, staying nowhere, until a freighter called the Platypus drops him in Broker with a pocket full of his cousin's emails, every one of them a lie. That is the man you take control of in the first mission. Not an immigrant chasing a dream. A veteran working through a list. The last piece arrives in an airport cargo bay. Florian turns out to be innocent. He is living in Liberty City as Bernie Crane, terrified of being dragged back into the past he rebuilt himself to escape. Which leaves Darko Brevic, untraceable until a government front company hands him over as payment for Niko's services and flies him in from Bucharest. The man they drag out is a wreck, sick, thin, hollowed out by heroin. And when Niko finally asks the question he has been carrying for 10 years, the answer is $1,000. 12 of his friends sold for $1,000 of drug money. Then Darko says the part most players forget. The squad had been killing civilians, some of them his own neighbors, and he watched it happen. He calls Niko a hypocrite, a man who has killed for money his entire adult life, standing in judgment over someone who did it once. Niko does not deny it. That is the moment the whole game has been building toward. He does not argue, he does not correct the record, he stands there holding a gun and lets it be true. And then Rockstar makes it your problem. Kill him or walk away. Either version ends with Niko exactly as broken as he started. Now, one honest note about the pieces that do not fit. Niko says the betrayal happened 10 years ago. In a phone call afterwards, Florian puts it at 12 or 13. The Yugoslav wars ended in 1995, and the game takes place in 2008, which does not fit either number cleanly. There are two fair ways to read that. One is that a script carrying this much dialogue had a continuity slip, and nothing deeper is hiding underneath. The other is that it fits how Rockstar handles the whole subject. Nobody in that story is a reliable narrator about the war, least of all, the two men who lived through it. Florian rebuilt his identity to get away from it. Niko has spent 10 years, or 12, or 13, turning it over every night. Memory does not keep clean records. Take whichever reading you prefer. The game never settles it for you. And that is the full backstory. No cutscene, no flashback, no mission where you play the ambush. Just fragments, dropped in car rides and drunk phone calls, until you are holding enough of them to see the shape, which is why Niko still lands harder than protagonists who got a proper origin story. You did not watch his past. You reconstructed it the same way he did, standing over a pit and counting bodies. Next on the channel, I'm breaking down the two endings of GTA 4 and why Rockstar still refuses to call either one of them canon. Subscribe so it shows up when it drops.